Hi, welcome to Shaky Sports Journeys. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're joining on YouTube, please be subscribing for free. And as well as that, you can catch it on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you like to catch your podcast. Great guest for you today. First time for me. I've had people from many different sports on the podcast, but this is something different. So I'm really curious to hear all about it and the journey as well. I'm talking about ex-Scottish volleyball internationalist, as well as ex-Team GB as well, Olympian, captain, quite an impressive guest to have. I'm talking about Lynne Beattie. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, nice to see you.
Lovely to see you as well. I kind of caught Lynne by surprise. I think she thought we were having an initial chat today, and then I was quick to inform her that we're actually recording the podcast today. So she's all right. She's in the
Freestyle,
hot
all
seat.
good.
So, Lynne, let's start by going back. I'm going to try and get your memory going. Tell me, you're born 23rd of December 1985. Tell me a bit about where you were born, where you grew up, family, childhood, a bit of everything.
Right, so I grew up in the south side of Glasgow in a little village called Eaglesham. Yeah, family really into sport. Was involved in just about every sport you can think of from a young age. Have very early memories of watching the Olympics on TV. And yeah, it was just a really big part of my life growing up.
So when you say a lot that you would take to any sports, what kind of sports are we talking that you gave a go at when you were younger?
Anything, football, badminton, basketball. I was really into athletics until about the age of 16. Ran for a club called Giffnock North in the south side of Glasgow. And then probably around the age of 16, 17, I decided to take volleyball on more seriously.
Where did the volleyball come from? I mean, it's a sport I know well. You see enough of it, but I mean, I don't know. I've never come across anybody who says I play at a volleyball club. You hear badminton, tennis, other things. You don't hear it that often. So how did it come from your family, or did you just take a liking to it when you tried it?
Yeah, so probably the very first experience I had of it was my sister. So my big sister, 4 years older than me. She had played volleyball at school and would come back home and kind of practice in the garden and stuff. So initially it was through my sister, mucking about in the back garden. And then when I transitioned from primary school up to high school, they ran like a summer volleyball camp. So that was really my first experience of volleyball. A chance to meet new people. Some of my friends were going along as well. So it was just kind of breaking myself into that high school environment, but absolutely loved the sport. It was a team sport. And, I spoke to some teachers at that point and, they said I had some potential. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind about trying the sport and, pushing forward with it. But at that point, at the age of 12, you're just trying lots of different things. And just really enjoyed it. We get trips out of school. We got to go and play in tournaments, which was always a bonus. But yeah, just really enjoyed that social aspect. And then kind of further into high school, maybe around 16, I joined the volleyball club in Glasgow called Surrogatzi. And just that's probably when I started to think, yeah, I really like this sport. I want to take this a little bit more seriously.
You mentioned it's a team sport. Now I've seen it played in pairs, which tends to be, I think we can talk about that later, but that's like the beach volleyball that you see. How many is it, remind me please, on the court in like a normal volleyball match?
6 on court at one time. So normally you've got about a squad of 12 to 14 players, but there's only 6 on court at one time.
And can you sub as many times as you want in volleyball?
Yeah, I need to go back to my indoor rules, but I think you can sub several times, several players indoors in one set. So you can sub in and out. But as you said, beach volleyball, the rules are slightly different. There's no subs. You've not got no coach by your side. So it's just the two of you out there kind of exposed to the world. So yeah, you are allowed subs in volleyball.
It's a tough sport, and I know it from giving it a go on a few beaches, not very well, right enough. But even on the kind of hard indoor surface, there's a lot of jumping, stretching. what kind of fitness goes into volleyball? What kind of training do you need to do to play at that kind of level?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose power is a huge element in the sport. So, hitting the ball hard, being fast across the ground, being explosive. So lots of plyometrics, lots of strength work in the gym. But a lot of it's very technical. So lots of reps and working on your technique from a young age is really important. And I suppose, beach and indoor volleyball, there's a lot of similarities, and both, playing both from a young age would be something that I'd advise, because they both help each other out a little bit.
Do you, what kind of injuries what kind of injuries do, they must get a few, like ankles
Yeah.
must twist and lower backs, I can imagine. Tell me about what you've seen, or if you've experienced any injuries.
I've seen, touch wood, I've been relatively safe, but ankles are a big one. If you're close to the net with people, you can land on people's feet and things, and you can roll your ankle. Knees are a big one, and shoulders, just with that kind of overhead action. So yeah, those are probably the three main ones. Thankfully, I've not had anything too bad. I had an injury maybe about 8 years ago when I was transitioning from indoor to beach volleyball, and just kind of overdid it, and I tore my plantar fascia on the bottom of my foot, which wasn't a very pleasant one, but the recovery was relatively quick, so not too bad.
I can imagine it was pretty painful at the time. So you played at the club. By this point, you're obviously into the sport now. This is kind of your chosen sport. You've gone through high school, tried a lot of different sports, but you were getting to that point. You've got to that point now where you've kind of made that decision. How quickly did you rise up to kind of start to play it really competitive and then get towards playing international level?
So I got my first cap for Scotland when I was 17.
Wow.
The youngest player on the team at that point. And after that first experience, first cap was against England at the Kelvin Hall. So it was a great experience. And after that, I was just really hungry to get more of that. And then by the age of 20, I was the captain of the Scottish team. And at that point, there was probably rumours that the Olympics in 2012 would be in London. So that was kind of a carrot that was, dangling there for me. But there was nothing kind of set in stone by that point. So my aspirations at that age was to try and go away once I'd finished university, to go and play professionally in European leagues across Europe. So at that point, that was my ambition. And then in 2006, when London won the bid to host the Olympics, a lot of us, we moved down to Sheffield, we trialled for that team, and all of a sudden I'm in a squad, in a British squad, preparing for an Olympic Games. So it did escalate pretty quickly. But yeah, I just always wanted to challenge myself at that next level, and the Olympics are obviously the pinnacle of anyone's sporting career. So I was going to do everything to try and achieve that.
What an experience! As I said, just going back through some of that, it really was kind of, you went from like playing at high school as probably more of a social enjoyment. You were obviously good club, and then you took to that scene very well. I mean, if you played against England your first game as a 17-year-old youngest player, strikes me that you were very mature for your age and able to handle that kind of pressure. I've played sport at a good level myself, but at that age you're kind of feeling your way into it, or if you play at a young age, but then by 20, you've obviously earned the respect of your peers. You've gone through that period, and they've chosen you as to be a leader. Big pat in the back. I'm really impressed. That's to handle all that at a young age is a great achievement, and it obviously got noticed not just in Scotland, but wider as well, because you go on to compete in the Olympics as a captain.
Yeah, I mean, I probably give a lot of credit to the people who were around me at that point when I was 17. The captain of the Scottish team at that point was a legend of the game, Sandra Grubb, who taught me a lot, and she encouraged me a lot at that age to kind of strive for the higher level in the sport. So I learned a lot from her, and then just throughout my experiences, there was people around me that really supported my progress. and then into the British programme, you're all of a sudden at that higher level with lots of players, not just one or two players, but lots of players around you that are of that same level and pushing to be better and pushing to get into that team. And I think it was just that ambition I had and that drive I had to be the best I could possibly be every day that caught the eye of some of the coaches. And yeah, I suppose probably not your most vocal kind of leader, as some might perceive a leader to be. It was more around that kind of leading by example, and just kind of supporting other players to be the best we can be as a team. That was the reason I ended up being in that role, and something I'm very proud of, and you know, honoured to have been captain both of the Scottish team and the British team going to the Olympics.
So talk to me about your Olympic experience then. Feel free to tell me any little bits of little stories in there or something you remember that's just kind of you'll never forget. But I mean, that for anybody out with from other sports, I don't think we really like cricket. It's never a sport that's, although it's been talked about in recent times, it's not in the Olympics. So I played cricket. I did play football as well, but even football only has had a little bit of a presence. It's never really taken off in the Olympics. But so I've never really had that. I never wanted to go to the Olympics as a sports person, but for anybody out with that, when you're in a sport that the Olympics is the pinnacle of that. So to be there and represent your country, what is that? What or your nation in Great Britain? What's that like?
It really was kind of everything. It sounds a bit cliche, but it was everything you dream of it being. We played in a venue called Earl's Court, 15,000 people screaming, you know, Team GB. And as the captain, you walk out first into that arena, and it's, you know, nothing can replicate that. And we did try. We worked with sports sites and other members of staff, like in the preparations leading up to that, to try and prepare us in the best possible way. But nothing is ever going to prepare you for, you know, pulling on the Olympic kit and walking out there in front of 15,000 fans. So it really was an amazing experience. Probably what I would add is our journey to that point was one of a lot of fun, but there was a lot of adversity in there as well. We had some challenges around kind of funding and some players having to go off and compete abroad and then come back. And we lived in a fire station in the summer leading up to the Olympic Games as a solution to some financial kind of challenges that we had. And our coach was working behind the scenes to try and get all the players a solution to accommodation and food and everything. So ended up.
How did that get arranged? Was it a closed down fire, or were they on duty while the GB volleyball team was just really? It
was an active development centre, so there was firefighters in there doing their training. We actually did a bit of a team building exercise with them. We went into like burning buildings and stuff, and abseiled down, you know, the big tower that they have at the training centres. And we did a bit of volleyball with them as well. So there was a bit of team building there. But I think that kind of experience of everyone being under the one roof, and it really pushed us to be the best kind of team, have the best team dynamics we possibly could, and really pushed us to be a really well performing team when it came to the Olympics. So there was lots of kind of random experiences that we had in the lead up to the Olympic Games, some that other sports wouldn't have had to deal with, but I think that was all in the beauty of the experience and made us stronger for it. So
I'm just thinking, though, you know, when you think about that fire, you know, our fire rescue fighters, it's all built on team ethos.
Yeah,
they have to work, and like, so they were actually, in some ways, although you never got the funding and the fair opportunity that maybe a lot of other sports were getting, where they were sitting in a nice hotel, you know, had everything kind of for them, you had to kind of do it the hard way. But that right there, it almost sounds to me like it was a pre-camp preparation for going into the challenge ahead. And I'm sure mixing shoulders with the fire rescue fighters must have been kind of just built up your team strength, and kind of that you were ready for any challenge ahead. That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
Yeah, it seemed to be in that we were just in that kind of performance environment, and obviously playing sport is not even on the same level as what firefighters have to do in going out and saving lives, but it certainly felt like, they have to go out and perform, and they just go and do it. And we kind of learned a lot from being in that elite environment. And we definitely learned a lot, and they were just a brilliant bunch of people to be around. So definitely, I wouldn't have changed that experience for the world. It was, like you said, it made it very special, and certainly helped us on the court as well.
So the actual, you talk about you can't prepare for playing in front of 15,000 people, and that buzz of being at the Olympics. How did you get on, and how did you handle do you think you did yourself justice under the lights, as you would say? Did you play to your ability and the rest of your teammates?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a team, we exceeded expectations. We didn't get a medal. We finished 9th out of 12 teams, but we got a win on the Olympic stage against a team that were ranked 16th, I think, and we were ranked 69th in the world. Wow. So, we were competing well above our level, and just that experience of facing the best teams in the world, the best players in the world through the net, and having a duel with them and winning points off them was just a brilliant experience. And we were prepared well, and I think we definitely did ourselves proud and enjoyed the experience as well.
Volleyball, it's quite it comes across quite a, it's an aggressive game. It's like it's played. I mean, those smashes and the effort that goes into them. It's a strong. You have to be. It's a strong. I've always struck me as people need to be strong to play. Is there ever any spice through the net? If is there ever any kind of every sport has a bit of jip in it here and there. But is that part of volleyball?
It can be. It's obviously a non-contact sport, but there can be a little bit of spice through the net for sure, which adds a bit of drama to it. But most of the time, the referees are on top of that. And you end up coming back to your own team. If you celebrate through the net, that could be a yellow card and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So there's definitely
ways to make a wee cheeky jibe here and there where the ref doesn't hear you. As long as it's not abuse or crossing the line, but just letting your opponent, it just strikes me as that kind of game. You get back with a smash and just let your opponent know the other side of the net. Tennis has got a bit of it as well. When you watch badminton, there's always a wee bit there. But volleyball, you're in a big group of you. Yeah. So it's quite it's so close, such close blocks.
Yeah, I don't know whether there's something about the net being in between you that makes you kind of, it gives you that feisty feeling through the net to each other. But most of the time, most players are well behaved. But there is, from time to time, there have some moments for sure.
Listen, a wee bit of spice, a wee bit of edge. That didn't do anyone any harm in a competitive game. You went on as well. This is one I'm really interested in asking about. You played for Team Scotland alongside Mel Coates in the inaugural Women's Beach Volleyball Tournament. Now, this is what I've watched quite a bit of, and I've played a bit of or attempted to when I've been on cricket tours, etc. But what's that like? That's obviously, you said that's 2 players.
Yeah.
High intensity, no rest, no referee. It sounds like it's just free for all. Play to, it's hardcore.
It is hardcore. There is a referee. There's no coach though. So indoor, you've got a coach by the side. They're
coach, no ref.
Doing subs and stuff, but on the beach you've got no coach. They're in the crowd. They're not allowed to kind of interact with you, a bit like tennis. But although the skills and stuff are the same, the game, as I found out very quickly, was very different to indoor. The mental side of the game, I think, is very different. It's just the 2 of you out there, so you've really got to solve problems on your own. You've got to face that adversity on your own. And the physical side of the game is very different as well. So one of my assets in the indoor game was how high I jumped. And all of a sudden I moved over to the sand and found it really hard to jump. So I had to kind of adapt. And the patience that took was something that I probably didn't expect right at the start. You go over as a good indoor player and then all of a sudden you feel like a beginner on the sand. So yeah, that definitely took time. But as I kind of embraced that change, it was a good time in my career for that change. I was up for the challenge, and very quickly was playing internationally with Mel, and played in the World Tour event, probably the first time a Scottish team has done that in history. And then beach volleyball got awarded into the 2018 Commonwealth Games. So all of a sudden that became my next goal. And we were out there trying to make history for the sport.
So how did you make that adjustment? You're on a hard surface, then you're on the sand, obviously. So that jump, you don't have that spring anymore, or that. So what kind of training? Obviously, I'm assuming a coach would have had a big influence on you at that point, making that transition as well.
Actually, no, we didn't actually have a coach at that point. But through contacts that we had abroad and coaches that weren't our coach, but were in the kind of system, we would get some advice and some tips from them. But just lots of time on the sand. The more you're in the sand, running, moving, jumping, the quicker you adapt to that environment. So yeah, lots of reps. Lots of the reps in the summer, lots of reps in the winter. Just getting strong for the sand. You can be as fit as you want off the sand, but you really have to have that time in the sand to get fit for your sport when in beach volleyball. So yeah, just lots of practice, lots of reps, and eventually that fitness comes.
Who's the best hard court surface, and who's the best beach ball? Who are the kind of countries that are kind of leading the way in either?
So in the women's game, actually up there, both indoor and beach, is probably Brazil and USA.
I thought I'd seen Brazil quite good at it.
Yeah, they have about 20 teams that play at a very high level in the world tour. USA are the same. They've got just that depth of team, and yeah, lots of good teams out there. So anytime you come up against them in the world tour, you're going to have a tough game. But the European teams, German, Swiss teams, they're all starting to really come strong at the highest level as well.
So have you played against both those two big that you mentioned, Brazil, you mentioned USA? What's your experience of playing against them?
We've definitely played against USA. They're just, you don't get away with anything. You've got to work really hard just to win 1 point when you're up against these teams, and it definitely teaches you a lot. We kind of took from games like that you just have to be training at that level consistently to be able to compete and sustain that level in a competition, which is something that we've not quite had. So you're going to be up against it when you're playing against these teams who are training twice a day in, day out at the highest level. They've got great coaches, and they've just got that history behind them as well in the game. So yeah, it's always nice to challenge yourself against these teams, but you're going to be up against it.
Margin for error, I'd imagine, is like very slim. Can't be leaving that ball dipping above the net too much, or
absolutely not.
It's not going to end well. It's really interesting because I'm trying to get into your headspace of this playing volleyball. And the next question I want to ask you is, take me into a moment deep in the trenches, a game that comes back to mind. You can choose any game you want, where you were just thinking, like, this is hard, and I'm like, I need to find something. Don't think I've got it. Or your teammates' heads are going down. So a leadership moment, and you've managed to, or you personally have managed to lift your game as well as your team. Anything that comes to mind?
I think, and this is just through lots of practice, lots of failure, and kind of working out what works for you as a team, is just that focusing on the next point and your next action. No amount of kind of dwelling on the past and what's just happened is going to help you for the next moment. So it's just that forward focus, and yeah, supporting your teammate. There's just the two of you out there, so if someone's having a hard time, then you've just got to support them, and that's where that team dynamics and team element comes into a lot more on the beach as well. Because if one of you's having a hard time, and the other one's not supportive, then it can be a really difficult time for you both. So yeah, just that support, giving each other that confidence, and just a lot of you get a lot of confidence from the way you prepare as well. So that practicing doing that in training and knowing what works to get out of those situations is really helpful.
Yeah, because when you get a lot of players, I use tennis for an example, they're like the best in the world at singles, and you put them in a doubles team, and it doesn't work. And you've gone from playing in a team of 6 on the court at one point to just two. So I'd imagine you have to kind of really get to know your partner, like, not just on the court, but off the court as well, that you're kind of really well connected with each other on that front. Is that important? Do you off the pitch, off the court, did you try and spend a lot of time together?
Yeah, 100%. I think beach volleyball is one of these sports that if you don't get on with your partner, it will be more difficult. So we do, we try and work on some team things off court as well and try and bring them onto the court. But you're spending so much time with each other when you're traveling, when you're competing, when you're training. So yeah, it's going to be very difficult if you don't get on with each other, but also if you don't have those solutions to challenges. So when times get tough, knowing how each other reacts to certain situations, knowing what each other's values are and how we behave in certain situations is also really important, so that we can understand what each other needs, and know how to react. Mel will probably react to situations slightly different to I would, but we both need different things in those situations, and as long as we both know that, then we can get out of a situation pretty quickly. So and the longer you play with each other, the more experience you get in these tough situations, which makes you a stronger team and a tougher team to break down.
Listening to you strike me as, you mentioned your leadership style earlier, so I know I can tell now by talking to you, you would never have been one of them shouting and ranting at the other teammates to get themselves in order. You seem to just be able to process things really well and then put it across. I can imagine you just being that calming influence, but getting your points across that are needed to the team at the same time. I'm not saying sometimes everyone doesn't need a kick up the backside. That works as well sometimes, but your approach, I think, is why you've managed to be in leadership for a long period of time, because you've got that. Every time I've tried to kind of probe to get your emotional side out, you're very you're very leveled and balanced, which is really important in high level sport. Something else you touched on earlier on, and I wanted to ask the question, but I thought we'd go through the kind of sport and things you've done in the sport prior to asking that. But you mentioned funding. You mentioned kind of this. Where does volleyball sit just now in Scotland? What kind of stamp does it have in Scottish sport? Do we have lots of clubs out there and enough people playing it? Does it have enough funding?
Yeah, I mean, you would always argue that your own sport needs more. I think it's a sport that's definitely growing, and actually with the beach side of things, I think with it getting into the Commonwealth Games and us now having a high performance outlet for the sport, the profile has been driven a lot more, on social media, on TV. We had a lot of coverage of beach volleyball on TV on the BBC, over the last year or so. And I think unless you see these sports on TV, people don't know that they're available. But in terms of the grassroots and community stuff, we've got clubs. We've got some clubs doing some great things. And I think it's just creating these opportunities for more people. I think we're really good at attracting people to our sport who are interested in sport, but it's tackling how we introduce our game to more people who are not playing our sport. Because I think it's got a lot to offer, specifically around that social element. Beach volleyball is obviously outside, so it's a great opportunity to get active outdoors, and it's just really harnessing these advantages and these benefits of our sport. So yes, we can always do more, but I think we're definitely on the up, and there's lots of great things happening in volleyball.
Great to hear. Once you kind of finished up playing, you stayed from what I can tell, you've stayed in the, I think you were playing side by side while you were doing other things as well. It's so you took a regional development officer role up for Scottish volleyball.
Yep.
Tell me how that came about, and were you still juggling that as well as you're playing at the same time?
Yeah, so I started working for Scottish volleyball in 2014. Previous to that, I'd been playing professionally indoor volleyball across Europe. I actually had a bit of a transition year where I did my master's in strength and conditioning at Northumbria Uni. And then it was when I came back to Scotland, I got the job with Scottish volleyball. I was just really keen to give back to the sport. Didn't think I'd be there for the 7 years that I was, because I just loved it. I loved the opportunity to work in my own sport. I don't think many people get that opportunity. So working with the governing body to develop volleyball and beach volleyball was a great time. Really enjoyed it, working with some great people. And then only recently have now got a new job with Sport Scotland as a partnership manager, again working in community sport, and yeah, really enjoying that.
So the role now is that's a wider role now
Yeah.
that you're working. So what sports are you working with?
So I don't work directly with any sports. I've got a bit of a project management role with community sport hubs. So again, working with clubs and community organisations, or working with a network of community sport hub officers who work with community organisations to develop sport and use sport to achieve wider outcomes for people in local communities. So it's a really enjoyable role.
That role?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good. It's a nice change, a new challenge, and working with great people as well.
So I've seen recently as well, you did the Sport Scotland Young Ambassadors Conference.
Yeah.
That's how actually I've managed to connect with you. First, I seen you. You did the conference, a conference before I did the conference in Glasgow, and then I was telling you before we came on, the lovely Rona McLeod was full of compliments for you, and then we got connected from there. How did you enjoy? You must take a lot of pleasure from that as well, because you're part of the governing body now and seeing the work that's going into it and where these young ambassadors are going.
Oh, what a brilliant experience that was, just to be a really small part of it. Yeah, I'd known a little bit about young ambassadors before I went along, but I had no idea the kind of scale and the work that they did. And amazing group of young people that I got the opportunity to meet, and just the confidence that they had to deliver the sessions to their peers, I thought was brilliant, and I think showed me that young people are a real asset for sport across the country, and we really need to utilise them to develop sport and the benefits of sport.
I think something that stood out for me was I was asking them, do you actually get listened to when you put stuff forward? Because I've seen so many of these young groups put together. It looks good, but then the powers above maybe don't take on board really what they're saying. And it sounds like they really are listening. And I think it's so important, because talking to three of them on a podcast recently, they knew more about most things than I did. You know, their knowledge is incredible. Do you think that's something that's really important, that young people should be involved more in decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more we can get them into club committees, those leadership positions that are making decisions on sport, the more we can start to attract more young people to sport. And they are the future of sport, so why not get them involved? But I think it's just listening to them and talking to them to find out what it is that would attract them to get involved in these roles, and creating that environment for them.
I think I've already heard, I don't know the names in it, but quite a few of them that have been on the YPSPs have gone on and already are in leadership roles in quite a few different sports across Scotland. That's ultimately what you want to strive to see from these young ambassadors moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the conferences were a great platform to do that. I hope that they got a lot of confidence from that opportunity to work with others from other schools, other areas, and realise their potential, because they can, as I said, be a real asset to the growth of sport across communities across Scotland. So yeah, really looking forward to what that group achieve over the next year and beyond.
It's been really interesting. I was thinking to myself, I probably could ask you about another 20, 30 questions about the general rules, and I don't mean that's quite ignorant. I think I've got a good. I think I understand the beach volleyball easier when I'm watching that. But I'm going, maybe now that I might ping you the odd question and just ask you the next time I'm watching volleyball. At least I now know a professional volleyballer. If you don't mind, the odd question. But yeah, it was just interesting to hear about the kind of way the sport, the way you came through in the sport, the challenges that you play taking on volleyball. It sounds like it's got a lot of, you need to probably put in a lot of your own time, a lot of your own effort out with being financed, I'd imagine, to do it. So what's your advice to any young boy or girl out there who wants to play volleyball? How's the best way to go on and become a professional volleyball player?
I think my advice would always be not to be afraid to put yourself out with your comfort zone. I think that's the only place that you learn and you develop. And just ask questions of people who've been out there and done it, because they'll be able to give you some advice on who the right people to contact would be, what the right pathway to be, what to do next. So yeah, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and challenge yourself, for sure, out with your comfort zone. A lot of the time in volleyball, you end up in a group of people who are maybe not challenging your level or challenging your thinking. So go and seek those opportunities to get better.
Good advice. I think it's great advice. Don't stay in your comfort zone. If you want to go on and play at a top level, challenge yourself all the time, kind of like what you do in any area of life. So love that advice. It's been a pleasure having you on, Lynne. Maybe we can talk again sometime in the future. Who knows what you're going to do next? So you've got obviously an exciting role with Sport Scotland, but I'll be following you closely. And if I see you involved in anything that is very interesting, I may come back to you to get you on the podcast. But thank you ever so much for giving your time this evening and having a chat.
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me on. It's been great to chat.
Thank you.